Well, for 2 years now, Spotlight on America has been investigating the safety of America's generic drug supply, interviewing whistleblowers, scientists, former FDA inspectors, and patients who say the system is failing. Now, instead of backing away from its position, the FDA is doubling down. In a series of newly published web pages, the agency again insisting generic drugs meet the same quality and safety standards as brand name, even as Congress prepares legislation built around the idea that that is simply not true. Here's Spotlight on America's Lisa Fletcher.
If every generic drug truly met the same rigorous standards, why would Congress need legislation requiring the Department of Defense to buy only drugs independently identified as low risk? That question sits at the center of a new bipartisan bill from Representatives Rosa DeLauro and Rich McCormick.
I've said this wherever an FDA is, they are slow to deal with these issues. They should not be. Oftentimes just wonder if they really want to regulate, but that is their function and their job.
The legislation builds on a pilot program launched by Congress that has already exposed serious problems, from cancer-causing contaminants to improperly made medicines, many of which are made overseas in India. The premise is simple. Instead of assuming every generic drug is equally safe, identify drug quality worst to best and reward those at the top with federal purchasing contracts, starting with the U.S. military.
We want to make sure that whatever purchase there is on a generic drug that they're taking is not going to put them in harm's way.
But in a newly published response that appears to directly address growing criticism of the agency's oversight, the FDA insists that generic drugs must meet the same rigorous quality standards as brand drugs in dosage form, safety, strength, quality, and performance characteristics.
The FDA has now doubled down, publicly telling Americans that generic drugs meet the same quality standards. Is that scientifically supportable?
No, not at all.
Dr. Arthur Kellerman, a longtime emergency physician and co-author of a landmark New England Journal of Medicine article on generic drug quality, doesn't hesitate.
If the FDA cannot independently verify the quality and safety of generic drugs, should it continue to tell the American public that all generic drugs are equal to brands?
Absolutely not. We have to test product. And the FDA continues to this day to rely on factory inspections, even when they admit to Congress that they may be 5 or 6 or 7 years between visits. They continue to rely on paperwork submitted to them from the other side of the world without any way of independently validating that what's on those papers is correct. That's not good enough.
The FDA's website suggests that the criticisms are simply anecdotes and public concerns that omit important context about the agency's oversight.
The Office of Generic Drugs is calling objective problems anecdotal.
Right.
What was your response when you saw that word?
I was appalled. I really was. I just thought that was more than disingenuous. That was offensive. You're looking at congressional committees, investigative journalists, scientists, patients. Yeah, it was anecdotes and, et cetera.
We asked the head of the FDA's Office of Generic Drugs, who wrote that webpage, why she seemed to dismiss evidence from independent scientists, congressional investigators, independent testing labs, and even the FDA's own inspectors. She declined our request for an interview and asked that we submit questions to her in writing. We have done that. They said they could not meet our deadline. If we get answers to those questions, we'll bring them to you. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.